You're listening to HackerNews.fm, the unofficial rapid-fire summary of the hottest stories from Hacker News for December 5th, 2025. Buckle up, today feels like a glitch in the simulation.
A mega media plot twist, the internet's backbone wobbling, and a new AI model that sees the world a little too well. It's all happening at once.
We'll hit the global Cloudflare outage, peek at the latest in frontier vision AI, and more. But first, the Hollywood earthquake everyone's talking about. Netflix to acquire Warner Brothers in an $82.7 billion deal. All right, next up is Netflix to acquire Warner Brothers, which hit number one with 1,553 points and something like 1,182 comments. Big one.
Yeah, people had feelings about this one. Netflix's press release is all more choice and greater value for consumers, while spending $82.7 billion to swallow HBO, HBO Max, DC, the whole lot.
The top comment was pretty blunt. Any consolidation like this seems like a negative for consumers.
And in classic HBO fashion, they immediately pivoted to, okay, but what does this mean for the HBO Max engineers? One person wondered how long before everything's running on Netflix's backend.
There was also that tension about consolidation itself. One commenter said the narrative used to be, there isn't enough consolidation, because everyone missed the era when Netflix basically had most of the content in one place.
Another pushed back and said they actually want separation. Content companies on one side, streaming platforms on the other. And ideally, a world where you choose bundles by genre, not by corporate logo.
Someone else pointed out that's basically what we had a decade ago, when the whole Netflix Prize era was about better recommendation algorithms and CDNs. And now it's just a content arms race.
Speaking of algorithms, a commenter argued Netflix went from tell us what you like to chasing clicks and minutes watched, trading meaningful recommendations for, quote, surveillance and revenue extraction.
Others suspected Netflix pushes its own shows, and a former insider popped up in the thread to say that's couldn't be further from the truth, which was a nice little cameo.
Big thread on copyright, too. One person wanted everything older than, 10 to 14 years in the public domain, which they said would flood streaming with endless back catalog content. And another commenter chimed in that this would basically fix AI training data overnight.
And the Westworld example came up a lot. HBO yanking it to avoid residuals, prompting the line, hoarding is never good for society. It is wild that we've adopted laws to reward it.
Then you've got the antitrust angle. Someone said, surely the FTC will take issue with Netflix acquiring HBO Max. And the replies were basically, almost definitely not this FTC. Plus a little lament for the Lena Khan era.
My favorite meta remark was, remember when Netflix was trying to become HBO before HBO could become Netflix? That turned out weird.
The vibe I got overall is that HBO doesn't buy the more choice framing. They see higher prices, more gatekeeping, and a straight path to either cable 2.0 or piracy 3.0.
Allegedly.
Yeah, purely hypothetical piracy 3.0.
Next up is Cloudflare was down. This one hit around 759 points with over 460 comments, plus 2 dupes that briefly climbed to number 2 while everything was on fire.
Yeah, and the article is literally just cloudflare.com not loading, which is peak 2025. Behind that is their second big outage in 3 weeks, all kicked off by a web application firewall change that was supposed to mitigate a new React Server Components vulnerability, according to Cloudflare's own post.
For anyone not steeped in ops, Cloudflare is the CDN, the DDoS shield, the DNS, and the firewall in front of, 20% of the web. So when they sneeze, the internet catches the flu.
Top comment really captured the mood. One major outage, something exceptional. Several outages in a short time? They're going to suffer a massive reputation loss if this goes on. That's not what you want to hear about the company in front of a fifth of the web.
Another person chimed in, "At least this warrants a good review of anyone's dependency on Cloudflare." And elsewhere, folks in the thread called out their de facto monopoly and how the combination of service, features, reach, price, and integration makes them hard to avoid.
And people were discovering they were indirectly on Cloudflare. One commenter using Render said, "We use Render, which apparently uses Cloudflare. It went down. Hard to know what third-party services you depend on uses Cloudflare."
Others were like, "No, you can know." They pointed out that DPAs and privacy terms list subprocessors. It's actually fairly easy to know which third-party services a SaaS depends on if you bother to read the docs.
Then you get into the business calculus. One comment goes, "Alternative infrastructure costs money. If you have 2 hours of downtime every 5 years, it may not have a significant revenue impact. Nobody gets fired for buying IBM. Same old story, just with edge networks instead of mainframes. Our human editor actually built a platform developer CDN company with exactly this kind of redundancy. They'd ride out hyperscaler outages that would bring down other companies because those folks didn't want to invest in the extra cost for alternative infrastructure at the ready or deal with the operational complexity."
The more technical folks were not impressed with Cloudflare's rollout story. They quoted the incident page, "Global config change, no gradual rollout," and basically asked, why not do 1% ramp-ups with health checks? Especially after the big November 18th bot config outage and the June KV incident, you'd think, maybe let's not flip the giant switch all at once.
Cloudflare's blog now promises enhanced rollouts and fail-open error handling, which, is reassuring after the faceplant. But one HNer summed it up. Cloudflare is a huge system in active development. It will randomly fail. There is a point where the cost to not fail simply becomes too high. That's the trade-off when you centralize this much.
Meanwhile, the dupe thread just devolved into glorious absurdity. People posting, "It's down detectors all the way down," then chains of down detectors, downdetector.com, and someone deadpanning, "Can't get hacked when you are down."
So the takeaway feels like, assume even the reliable core of the internet is going to faceplant occasionally. Know which bits of your stack ride on Cloudflare, and where it really matters, design things so one company's bad config push doesn't take you entirely offline.
Our next story is announcing the NeurIPS 2025 Best Paper Awards, which climbed up to position 9 on Hacker News with 165 points and 27 comments.
Yeah, and our human editor was kind of baffled it didn't go higher, given this is literally the year's best papers at the top ML conference.
It's a nice write-up, too. Clean, readable, and those reflections from the selection committee sections that one HN commenter said made the link worth it just for that part.
Let's start with the most vibesy one, artificial hive mind. The paper introduces this infinity chat dataset of 26,000 real, open-ended prompts to test how diverse LLM answers really are.
And the answer is, not very. They find what they call an artificial hive mind effect, where not only one model repeats itself, but different models converge on really similar outputs.
HN had a great example there. A commenter quoted the paper's figure. Ask, write a metaphor about time, and model responses cluster into basically, time is a river, and time is a weaver.
Then they tried Gemini and got, time is a patient wind against the cliff face of memory. And another commenter was like, that's still basically a river smoothing stones.
The deeper point from the paper is that alignment and these reward models seem to be miscalibrated to actual human preference diversity. So we may be trading pluralism for safe sameness.
Which is a nice segue into the runner-up everyone on HN seemed to love. Does reinforcement learning really incentivize reasoning capacity in LLMs beyond the base model?
Right. They look at RL with verifiable rewards. So RL that gets a clear right-wrong signal on math or code, and they measure pass at K. Basically, if I sample K answers, does any one of them succeed?
The big claim is that RL makes models more efficient at sampling the right path, but doesn't seem to create genuinely new reasoning patterns beyond what the base model already had.
One commenter summarized it as RL sharpening the distribution, not uncovering new paths. And then there was that fun argument about whether a random number generator would eventually beat everything for huge K.
Another reply pushed back. In the real regime, K like 256, not infinity, LLMs still do way better than infinite monkeys, and pass at K is really just a proxy for, is the skill somewhere inside the model?
I liked the creativity versus correctness framing someone offered. Base models are more creative in the sense of exploring lots of paths. RL-trained ones are more correct, but narrower.
Then there's the diffusion paper, Why Diffusion Models Don't Memorize. Very physicsy. They show training has two timescales, an early generalize well window, and a later start memorizing phase.
HN noticed that too. One commenter pointed out recognizing multiple stat mech physicists on the author list and joked that physicists keep punching above their expectations in ML.
And finally, superposition yields robust neural scaling got some love. The idea is that modern LLMs cram more features than they have dimensions, so features overlap, superposition, and that alone can explain why loss falls nicely as you scale model size.
One HN commenter riffed on that, saying superposed concepts might be hard for a smooth neural net to reason about, until you discretize into tokens and force a choice.
There's also the very practical gated attention paper, and the 1,000-layer self-supervised RL work, and even a pure theory result about optimal mistake bounds. But we're out of time to really unpack those.
If you're only going to skim one thing, I'd say read the Selection Committee Reflections and the RL Reasoning paper. They're both surprisingly accessible and very relevant to how we build and use these models.
All right, next up is Gemini 3 Pro, the frontier of vision AI, which shot up to number 3 on Hacker News. 422 points, a couple hundred comments. It was a whole thing.
Yeah, Google's blog post is basically, this is our most capable multimodal model ever. Big victory lap energy. They're bragging about documents, spatial reasoning, screen understanding, video, the works.
And multimodal here just means it can take in images, video, maybe PDFs, and text all at once. Screen understanding is basically let the AI look at your desktop or phone and actually click around like a human without immediately face planting.
Hacker News, of course, immediately tried to poke holes in the hype. The top comment describes this test image of a dog with 5 legs. Cursed image energy. Previous models insisted there were only 4, but Gemini 3 at least noticed the male anatomy in the right place.
Yeah, but it still couldn't just spit out 5 legs. Other folks tried similar tests and got models confidently insisting, nope, 4 legs, and then tying themselves in knots when corrected. One person said this is exactly the kind of test they run right when I'm starting to feel LLMs are intelligent.
Same vibe with the 13-hour clock challenge. Tons of image models will happily draw a normal 12-hour clock and then slap 13 somewhere as a label. But actually asking for a real 13-tick dial? They just don't. Which people read as pattern matching totally beating out any real abstraction.
That spawned this whole subthread on whether these things truly generalize. One commenter just flatly said LLMs are fancy lorem ipsum based on a keyword and will never really learn to count without external tools. And then someone else jumps in like, well, yeah, we RL them so hard to avoid hallucinations that we basically punish any out-of-distribution creativity.
It's not all doom and gloom, though. Someone pointed at Google's own ScreenSpot benchmark jump, going from something like 11% to 71% screen understanding accuracy. They called it an insane jump, and it even beats other frontier models on that benchmark.
And a few people were already extrapolating like crazy. If the model can reliably understand and operate UIs, it can become this QA layer for software. Click every button, try every flow. One commenter basically imagined a software genie, where you might type something like, go make a Counter-Strike 1.6 clone, here's $500, you have 2 hours, and it just goes off and does it.
Then you've got the very practical folks. One person wants to compare this to Amazon Textract for handwritten data sheets. Another uses Gemini Live mode to talk about their plants, just points the camera and chats, and says it correctly flags diseases and suggests next steps.
And then comes the pushback. A developer complained Gemini 3 Pro is so non-deterministic with max thinking turned on that it's really hard to put in production. Another was like, yeah, and don't forget, network connection to Google required so we can harvest your data. Classic HN energy.
People were genuinely intrigued by the video side, though. Stuff like high frame rate understanding and turning long videos into code. But they're asking, is this actually real time? Can it do something like play a game just from pixels? Or is this all cherry-picked demo magic?
So the vibe I got was, the benchmarks and demos look wild, but until 5-legged dogs and 13-hour clocks are boring for these models, Hacker News is going to stay cautiously impressed rather than fully convinced. All right, next up is most technical problems are people problems, which shot up to number 2 on Hacker News, about 380 points, 281 comments. So it definitely hit a nerve.
Yeah, the author basically walks through this tech debt horror story. We're talking no tests, ancient frameworks hanging on for dear life, and someone literally copy-pasting Windows code to make a Linux version.
Yeah, just Control-C, Control-V, ship it. So he comes in, does the heroic refactor thing, ignores the politics, focuses on fix the code, fix the world, and the project still slips. That's when he realizes the real blockers are people. Sales overpromising, devs refusing to learn anything new, managers deep in denial.
And he has this line I really liked. You'll never clean up tech debt faster than others create it. It's like ER triage. You're just trying to stop the bleeding before the next ambulance shows up.
Hacker News, for once, mostly nodded along. But one of the top comments added a twist. Most people problems are actually communication problems.
Right. Engineers siloed off, product treating them like an in-house outsourcing shop. Everybody rowing hard but toward different metrics. Nobody's actually aligned on what good looks like, so the system just keeps generating debt.
I loved the shadow sessions idea from that thread. An internal tools engineer sets up these auto-scheduled, super lightweight sessions using Slack, regular check-ins where engineers connect with users and learn what they're really doing day to day.
And then they come back with this pile of tiny, high-leverage fixes. Oh, this button should be here. This flow needs one less dialogue. Nothing sexy, but it all removes friction.
There were great dogfooding stories, too. Like companies forcing devs into delivery vans or onto support queues during Christmas week.
Yeah, just, congrats, you're frontline now. And then January rolls around, and suddenly it's, wait, why does this take 3 extra clicks? And that turns into a big push of obvious practical fixes.
People also asked, okay, if it's fundamentally a people problem, how do you sell cleanup time to the business? And the consensus was, metrics over vibes. Measure delays, bug rates, incident risk, tie everything back to money and risk, not just, this code is ugly.
One commenter warned about the nuclear option of telling leadership, a competent competitor could ship this in days. It might even be true, but it's incredibly political. You're basically challenging the existing technical order and calling out everyone who built it.
And there was pushback on the flip side, too. Not all old code or cautious senior engineers are debt by default. Sometimes stability is the feature, and if you just label that as debt, you drift into ageism and you lose a lot of hard-won context.
So the thread kind of lands in this nuanced place. Tech problems usually start as people and incentive problems, and fixing them means real organizational work. Communication, alignment, incentives, not just prettier code in a pull request.
Next up is CSS now has an if conditional function, which is sitting at position 12 with about 260 points and 222 comments.
Yeah, and the article is really just the "Can I use" entry, but the thread goes deep on what this new CSS if actually means in practice.
In plain English, if lets you choose a CSS value based on conditions, like dark versus light mode, inside a single property, instead of splitting rules all over the place. One commenter called it simple syntactic sugar and showed a background that switches between ice and fire themes in one declaration.
The top vibe was kind of philosophical, though. Someone wrote, "Give it enough time, every declarative language becomes a programming language." And others jumped in to point out CSS is already Turing complete anyway.
Another person asked, why is CSS becoming a programming language? And who decides on this anyway? And the answer was basically the CSS working group, plus reminders that @media and @supports were already conditionals in disguise.
The "Can I use" page itself got scrutinized. One commenter noted it claims, "All major browser engines are working on implementing this spec, while there's no public standards position from Mozilla or WebKit, and Firefox's bug is basically idle." Someone joked, "Maybe the site is AI generated now."
And then you've got the naming police. Proposed title change. Chrome now has an if conditional function in CSS, since it's Chromium only today. That's a good reminder to read past the headline before you ship production CSS with this.
I liked the war story from the person who maintained an in-house SQL-like language and eventually added an if because users were copy-pasting two almost identical queries. Same pattern. Every configuration DSL slowly grows flow control.
Plus the classic web gripe cameo. Someone asked if CSS can finally vertically and horizontally center multi-line text in one element. Another commenter answered with a 1998-era display table snippet and basically said, yeah, CSS has been able to do that since CSS2.
So the takeaway is, if might clean up some gnarly CSS, but it's also another step in CSS's long march from simple styling toward full-blown programming language. Use it when it's everywhere, and until then, maybe keep an eye on those support tables.